वक्तव्य पनि होइन, यो एउटा स्ट्रक्चर्ड टक पनि होइन। मैले चाहिँ के भन्दैछु भने माई ऱ्यान्डम थट्स अन माइला बाजे। किनभने सायद जब मलाई प्रीतिले फोनमा रिक्वेस्ट गर्नुभयो, when she requested me, "Sir, can you say something on Mr. Ratanlal Brahmin?" And when my friend Uday also requested me, I gave thought to this. मैले धेरै सोचे, because to be very frank, personally I had no knowledge about this great man. It is only after hearing, because after that, त्यो पछि मैले के गरेँ भने मेरो धेरै साथीहरूलाई बेसी टाइम पनि पाइनँ, उहाँलाई सोधेँ हाम्रो माइला बाजेको विषयमा, मैले यस्तो यस्तो भन्नुपर्छ, के चाहिँ भन्नु, मलाई अलिकति आइडिया दिनुहोस् न। आई रिक्वेस्टेड देम। अन्त यस्तै थट्सहरू उहाँले जे जे जान्नुहुन्थ्यो मलाई भन्नुभयो। दे टोल्ड मी। र today I'm grateful here that I'm standing before this August gathering. I'm grateful to Preeti for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to say something, my random thoughts on this great personality. I think it's a great privilege because for me everything is a learning experience. I learn a lot when I attend such talks, such seminars, and today I've learned such a lot, and I think that's to my benefit. Personally, as I said, मैले माइला बाजेलाई कहिले पनि भेटिनँ, यो मेरो अभाग्य हो। This is it's misfortune on my part now when I think of it. I never had the opportunity to interact with him, but what I'm going to say on my random thoughts are what I have heard from my friends, from my acquaintances, and some family members. And of course, after reading Preeti's The Red Lion of the Hills, I realized more how unfortunate I was and still am. Ratanlal Brahmin, or very commonly, very friendly, very fondly, very popularly known as Maila Baji, will always be remembered as an iconic leader. There's no doubt about it. From what we've heard today, what we've read, what people say about him, definitely an iconic leader. I would regard him as a true Marxist, as mentioned here earlier by one speaker, a leader of the masses, a leader of the working class. He always believed in this Marxist principle of workers of the world unite, and I think that is what he strived for. A social worker, definitely a social worker. When I read about his role in the Great Bengal famine, I think he's been so rightly called the Robin Hood of the hills. And in my mind, or in my assessment, Ratanlal Brahmin or Maila Baje was definitely a rebel, but a rebel with a cause. So I think that's, in a nutshell, what I have deciphered, what I have analyzed about this great man. People will always remember Maila Baje not as a Marxist, not as a communist, but as a Darjeelinge. Because of his love for Darjeeling, because of his love for the people in the hills, because of his identifying with the cause of the workers, the tea garden workers. I think he will always be remembered on that line. He was definitely a multi-dimensional leader because, it's just not only political, not only being a Marxist, but you can see his involvement in so many other fields. Aru धेरै कामहरू उहाँले गर्नुभयो जस्तो उहाँ Dr. Mohan उहाँले भन्नुभयो his role in the movement, Bhasa movement. यो कसरी बिर्सिनु सक्नुहुन्छ हामीले सायद यो सब गर्दाखेरि I would regard him as a multi-dimensional leader who was trusted by the people, a person who was respected by everyone, not only by his own partymen, but also by people belonging to other ideologies. He was a man of simplicity, a man of honesty, a man of sincerity in whatever he did, and definitely a man of integrity to a cause. The communist movement in the hills will always be synonymous with Mailabaje. That, I think, has been very clearly stated. We all know about it. What is so remarkable about this great man is that there are so many firsts in his long, illustrious career as a social worker, as a politician, or even as a communist. And I think many of us may not be aware of it. Now, these are things that I have heard or I have just recollected from others. Some of my facts may be wrong here. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And these are definitely political, social, cultural things in my mind that should be written in golden letters. Because he was definitely the man of the moment during his times. And he'll always be a part and parcel of the history of Darjeeling and the people of the hills and of the tea gardens. Just to remember, just to recall some, which I know or which I have heard. When you look at the movement, when we trace the movement for Gorkhaland, I think one aspect will always go to Mailabaje because the Communist Party of India in 1947, the Darjeeling District Communist Party, were the first ones to place a memorandum before the Constituent Assembly. And I think that gave an impetus to us here that we have the right to self-determination. I think that is one of the greatest contributions I would attribute to Mailabaje. Then for the first time, he was in a way responsible for awakening the people, towards a homeland of our with his, in his memorandum, along with Ganesh Lal Subba, where he placed this memorandum before the Constituent Assembly for Gorkhastan. The trade union movement, I think that is his greatest contribution to the tea gardens and to the hills, because this movement, the roots will always go back to Mailabaje. His joining the Communist Party of India did definitely help Sushil Chatterjee to sow the seeds of communism in the hills, or the Communist Party, the CPI in the hills. Thanks to him, that a work culture was established for the first time in the tea gardens. It was he who brought about this. In 1955, I think this is one of his greatest contribution in my mind, was a landmark year. I think it was mentioned earlier also by another speaker. Under his dynamic leadership, the Mazdoor Union was established, and if my facts are correct, he, along with Devprakash Rai and the Gorkha League's Sramik Sangh, the union, they jointly called for a strike, and unfortunately during that strike, the unwanted incident of firing in Margaret's Hope took place, where 5 tea garden workers were killed. That was unfortunate. But then, to bring about awareness in the tea garden movement among laborers, I think the credit will definitely go to Mailabaje. Along with Mr. Jyoti Basu, I think this is another first of his, Mailabaje and the late Mr. Jyoti Basu were the only two, I think the first two CPI MLAs in the provincial assemblies in the 1940s. Now, my facts may be wrong there, but this is what I gathered. When the CPI split, Mailabaje took up the leadership of the CPIM in the hills, and I think 1971 was elected to the Lok Sabha, and there he created another history where in Darasural he entered parliament, and his attempt to take oath in Nepali, which was denied and which was mentioned again by the other speaker. But then that is a historical fact also, which should be recorded in golden letters. And of course, during that election, he defeated the INTUC candidate, Maitri Bose, I think. These are conventions, that today have been established. Like today in Parliament, when an MP takes oath from here, from the hills, representing the hills, they will always take oath in Nepali. जब हाम्रो एमएलएहरूले ओथ लिन्छ असेम्ब्लीमा, वेस्ट बेङ्गल असेम्ब्लीमा नेपालीमै ओथ लिन्छ। त्यही कारण यो एउटा कन्भेन्सन चाहिँ, त्यो क्रेडिट चाहिँ हामीले माइलबाजेलाई दिन सक्नुपर्छ। As I said already, my random thoughts, his role in the Bhasa movement, and of course in the Great Famine, which I read from Preeti's book. And so there are so many other anecdotes, like it was very correctly mentioned, there are thousands of anecdotes about Mailabaje. And some of these are so interesting. I've heard some of them, I've read some of them, and these anecdotes, I would say, reflects some of the characteristics of this great man. It definitely reflects his sternness. Some of these anecdotes reflects his humor. Some of these anecdotes reflects his simplicity. These are things, I think one can do research on these and, write a book on simply his anecdotes and what do they imply, what does it, how does it reflect on this great person. His relationship with other parties, contemporary parties then, his his relationship with other politicians, other political party leaders. I think these are some things that, which need to be emulated today, that working in cooperation, in conjunction, without any animosity. I think these are things that, we need to learn from him. As I said at the beginning, and I'll conclude it this way also, it's been my misfortune that I never got to know him personally, because otherwise I think I could have gone on and on, talking about him, his works, his role in so many things that he did. So I'd like to conclude by saying that in my assessment, Maila Baje, he was a cult figure. Definitely a cult figure. And because the things that surrounded him, his character, his personality, can never be matched, nor can it be emulated. He's above all that. So, one cannot be. I don't think there can be another Maila Baje in future. So that cult figure he established, something that cannot happen again. He was definitely a liberal and definitely a cultured Marxist or a cultured communist. He was a master of realpolitik. This is something very difficult, but I think he was one of the examples of a person who was a master of realpolitik. The brand of politics during his days or during his times, had a distinct flavor, had a distinct aura around it, which I don't think exists today, which is so different. So I'd like to thank Preeti that she's brought about this book, which has been so well analyzed, assessed. I'd just like to add one more thing, that whoever reads the book, please don't just read it. Chew it and digest it. Because I think we learn such a lot from this book. So once again, Preeti, thank you for bringing out this book and bringing out the man which many of us do not know, and many of us do not know, but we all should know.
रतनलाल ब्राह्मीणको नाति नै हुनुहुन्छ है, अनि तपाईले यो किताब लेख्ने सोच किन राख्नुभयो या के थियो?
एक्चुअली धेरै मेरो फ्रेन्ड्सहरूले उहाँको बारेमा जान्ने उत्सुकता राख्थे, अनि उहाँको बारेमा केही लेखेको छ कि भनेर रेफरेन्सको लागि माग्थे मलाई। अनि उहाँहरू चाहिँ विशेष गरेर अनेपालीहरू हुन्थे युनिभर्सिटीतिर, सो त्यतिखेर मैले केही पनि रेफरेन्सहरू दिनु सक्थिनँ उहाँलाई। अनि यो कुराले सधैँभरि नै अब खट्की नै रहेको थियो कि केही छैन, यत्रो कामहरू गरेका छन् भनेर हामीलाई थाहा छ, तर साँच्चै नै लेखेको त केही पनि छैन। हुनसक्छ अब उहाँ अब एउटा कम्युनिस्ट भएर होला, कसैले पनि यसरी लेख्ने जागरहरू गरेका थिएनन् उहाँको पार्टी कलरले गर्दाखेरि है। तर अब त्यसको माथि उठेर उहाँको अरू कामहरूलाई नै हेरेर चाहिँ केही न केही त गर्नुपर्ने हो भनेर एउटा चाहिँ दिमागमा जहिले पनि मेरो थियो, अनि अब एउटा मन पनि दुख्थ्यो। सो जानी नजानी सकि नसकी पनि बामे सर्दै भए पनि यो बुकलाई चाहिँ अब कम्प्लिट गर्न सकियो। अब अफकोर्स फाइनल त भएको छैन, यसको अरू एडिसनहरूमा हामीले अझै धेरै कतिवटा कुराहरू फिडब्याकको बादमा एड गर्न सक्छौँ है। अनि म खुसी माने मैले ग्रान्टेड लिइसकेको छु कि लाइक वी शुड ब्रिङ आउट अनदर वान बिकज इट्स हिस्ट्री एन्ड वी शुड प्रिजर्भ इट।
यो अङ्ग्रेजी भाषामा यो के सर्वप्रथम किताब हो रतनलाल ब्राह्मीणको?
अङ्ग्रेजी भाषामा किताब चाहिँ सर्वप्रथम हो। लेख चाहिँ तपाईँको आई थिङ्क बिफोर इन्डिपेन्डेन्स नै एउटा लेखिएको थियो छोटो, तर आई डोन्ट थिङ्क सो कि अरू केही इङ्ग्लिसमा छ जस्तो लागेको छैन मलाई।
यो किताब लेख्दाखेरि तपाईँले कस्तो प्रकारको स्ट्रक्चर चाहिँ तपाईँले सोच्नुभयो, कस्तो प्रकारले लेख्नुहुन्छ?
स्ट्रक्चर मैले मेमोयरबाट सुरु गरेको थिएँ मेरो आफ्नै स्मरणबाट सुरु गरेको थिएँ कुनै पनि अर्गनाइज तरिकाले त सुरु गरेको होइन आई थिङ्क मैले विवेक छेत्रीको एडभाइस लिएको थिएँ ओके अफ द टेलिग्राफ द्याट जस्ट राइट वाट एभर कम्स टु यर माइन्ड भनेर भनेको थियो अनि यसरी नै मैले आई जस्ट स्टार्टेड राइटिङ वाट एभर वाज देयर
तपाईँको बाजे भनौँ है रतनलाल ब्राह्मिन एउटा जाति प्रेमी भाषा प्रेमी हुनुहुन्थ्यो तर तपाईँले फेरि इङ्ग्लिसबाट एउटा किताब रिलिज गर्नुभयो यो चाहिँ के कारण
फर्स्ट कारण यो हो कि मलाई नेपाली त्यति राम्रो आउँदैन अनि म त्यस्तो राम्रो छुइनँ नेपालीमा मेरो एक्सप्रेसन्सहरूमा अफकोर्स हामी चल्दो त नेपाली बोल्छौँ तर जुन चाहिँ फर्मल राम्रो खालको ल्याङ्ग्वेज हामीलाई चाहिन्छ होला जुन प्रकारको डिस्क्रिप्सनहरू गर्नुको लागि मलाई त्यो कमान्ड चाहिन्छ होला त्यो नेपालीको त्यस्तो कमान्ड मेरोमा छैन है अब त्यसमा मलाई दुःख त लाग्छ तर इट इज ग्रोइङ है अनि हामी लाइफमा सिकि नै रहेको छौँ प्रत्येक दिन अनि यस भाषाप्रति अब मेरो लिनिङ आफ्नो मेरो नेपालीलाई अझै इम्प्रुभ गर्ने लिनिङहरू पनि मेरो भइ नै रहेछ तर त्यो बेलामा चाहिँ जब मैले बुक लेख्न थालेँ त्यतिखेर चाहिँ म नेपालीमा लेख्छु भनेर सोच्नु पनि सकेको थिइनँ भविष्यमा आई डोन्ट नो भविष्यमा हुनसक्छ अब आफूलाई इम्प्रुभ गरेर अलिकति अझै आँट गर्नु सक्छु होला
भविष्यमा यही किताबलाई कुनै ट्रान्सलेटलाई लिएर नेपालीबाट तपाईँले गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ
नेपालीमा यही बुकलाई ट्रान्सलेट गर्नु सकिन्छ तरै पनि अब अरू बुक्सहरू पनि छ हो अनि हुनु त यो यसलाई पनि अब कोहीले चासो देखायो भने है त्यही स्पिरिटमा ट्रान्सलेट गर्नु सक्ने अब राम्ररी बुझेर भयो भने त अब वाइ नट
तपाईँले यो किताब लेख्दाखेरि तपाईँको कस्तो हार्डसिप्सहरू कस्तो तपाईँले फेस गर्नुभयो
कठिनाइहरू हजुर कठिनाइहरू त अफकोर्स यहाँनिर मटेरियल्सहरू भनौँ न है रिसोर्सेसहरू त्यो त्यति साह्रो थिएन सो आई ह्याड टु किप अन सर्चिङ अनि सर्च गर्दा 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 अहिले त अब इन्टरनेट छ गुगल छ है सो आई युज टु गेट लिटल बिट्स एन्ड पिसेस रिलेटेड टु वाट एभर आई वाज राइटिङ सो आई ह्याड टु डु अ लट अफ सर्चिङ एभ्रिवेयर एन्ड आई ह्याड दोज बुक्स अब 6-7वटा 10वटा जस्तो बुक्स होला अनि लेखेको सानो सानो प्याम्फलेट्सहरू पनि छ उहाँको बारेमा तर हिस्टोरिकल ब्याकग्राउन्ड मेरो बुकमा चाहिँ मैले हिस्ट्री पनि इन्टरविभ गरेको छु त्यो ब्याकग्राउन्डहरू इन्टरविभ गर्ने ट्राई गरेको छु अनि सो आई निडेड टु रिड अ गुड बुक्स अन हिस्ट्री एज वेल एन्ड yes it was a challenge to get the resources the material and all that the reference material so that was there and it was also a very emotional experience because I am a very emotional person and I need to really imagine everything and it I feel it so to feel that entire period the pain all the challenges it was extremely exhausting and I felt sick and I left writing for about 1.5 years also and I thought I wouldn't touch it then again Sharda Didi she pushed me Sharda Chetri Didi the writer of Colors of Kanchenjunga she's been there behind me and she said that yes you must do it you must complete it so somehow I managed to complete it and so the procrastination and that sometimes the writer's block also and lack of reference materials and lack of a lot of things that I wanted to add maybe to help me build my story so all those things together sometimes made me stop writing but then later on somehow I managed to overcome and then ultimately my narrative took over and I could complete it